Black man was despised by the women on the plane, and the unexpected consequences shocked everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to the Stories of Life's Acts channel. And before we continue this story, let us know where you are from. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe as we release videos every day at 12:30 p.m. Sophie is an ambitious and confident girl, always believing in her abilities and not afraid to express her opinions. She works in the marketing department of a large company, where she has built a reputation for her sharpness and superior market analysis skills. Sophie never allows anyone to make her change her perspective on the world and those around her. To her, successful people are those who can make a big difference in society, while those who do nothing remarkable are simply insignificant and not worth her attention. One day, Sophie receives an assignment to go on a long business trip to another city to attend an important seminar on marketing strategies and brand development. This is a great opportunity for her to expand her network in the industry and also a chance to showcase her expertise. Sophie prepares carefully for the trip and arrives at the airport excited, confident that she will impress the partners and colleagues attending the seminar. During the flight, Sophie pays little attention to those around her as she is busy thinking about the marketing strategies she will present at the seminar. However, there is a man sitting next to her who catches her eye. He is dressed simply in a black suit with neatly trimmed short hair, but what draws Sophie's attention the most is his demeanor. He sits up straight, holding a thick book in his hands, and his eyes are focused on reading every page. The man is not hurried, not anxious or restless like other passengers, but instead exudes a calmness that Sophie cannot help but notice. It is a kind of confidence that Sophie cannot overlook. Although there was no communication, Sophie couldn't help but assess this man. He seemed like an ordinary person, unremarkable, with nothing special about him. Sophie wondered who he might be, perhaps a low-level employee or someone with no important connections in the industry. She silently thought that this flight might turn out to be an uneventful and forgettable journey, but she did not expect this man to become an important part of her story. Throughout the flight, Sophie decided to try approaching him to see if he was an interesting person. She began to smile and ask a few casual questions, but his answers were always brief and lacking enthusiasm. He only gave short responses, seeming not to want to engage in any conversation. Sophie couldn't understand why he was behaving like this, as she thought she could easily make friends and impress anyone. But he quietly continued reading his book, completely indifferent to her efforts. The feeling of being ignored began to make Sophie frustrated. She didn't give up, attempting to steer the conversation toward topics related to work, business trips, and even the successes she had achieved in her career. However, the man next to her remained indifferent, uninterested. The feeling of discomfort in Sophie's mind grew stronger. She began to feel as though he was dismissing her, or simply put that he was a boring person, not worth her attention. Finally, Sophie couldn't hold back her frustration. She glanced at him and gently said in a sarcastic tone, "You seem like a very quiet person. I guess you do not have anything important to do on this flight, do you?" The man just smiled faintly but did not say anything. Sophie felt even more irritated, and she felt as though she had asked a question that went unanswered. She began to feel superior to this man, and she was not afraid to show it. "You are just an ordinary person, are not you?" Sophie continued, once again looking at him with a dismissive gaze. "Probably nothing special, nothing worth noticing." But the man didn't reply. He kept reading his book, indifferent to her words. Sophie felt his silence was a challenge, but she could not understand why this person was not affected by her attitude. The flight ended, and Sophie quickly gathered her luggage, not giving much thought to the man who had sat next to her throughout the journey. To her, he was just an unremarkable person, someone who could not change anything in her life. But Sophie had no idea that, in a surprising twist, this man would become an important figure in her life, and that her dismissive attitude would be the turning point that opened up valuable lessons she would never forget. The flight ended, and Sophie quickly packed her luggage to disembark, still preoccupied with the strategies she would present at the upcoming seminar. She no longer remembered the man sitting next to her, because to Sophie, the flight was just a brief segment of her work journey. A person like him, dressed simply and seemingly unremarkable, how could he possibly affect her? A few days later, Sophie was busy attending the seminar and meetings with potential partners, but in her mind, these encounters were not very exciting. All she wanted was to prove herself, make a strong impression, and attract the attention of the key players in the industry. It wasn't long before she realized that she had forgotten an important part of this journey, a part that would unexpectedly change the way she viewed the world around her. Then, one day after the seminar ended, Sophie received a surprising email from the company's human resources department informing her that she would be joining an important meeting with a major partner who would present new strategies for the company's growth. She felt excited, but she did not pay much attention to the partner's name. She thought she would easily handle everything as usual. Sophie walked into the meeting room with a confident attitude, but as soon as she saw the person sitting across from her, she could not help but feel a little surprised. The man she had met on the flight, Marcus Johnson, was the head of this partner company. He was no longer just the simple man on the flight, but the chief executive officer of one of the largest companies in the industry she worked in. As soon as she realized this, Sophie felt the blood in her veins freeze. She couldn't believe that the man she had underestimated, even mocked in her mind, was someone with such power and influence. All the confidence she had before suddenly vanished, replaced by a sense of embarrassment that filled her thoughts. Throughout the meeting, Marcus controlled every exchange with calmness and confidence. He wasn't in a hurry, didn't show off, but each word he spoke was persuasive. Sophie, despite being responsible for the marketing department, could not help but feel out of place in the meeting room. She couldn't stop thinking about her attitude before. She had judged this man too hastily and with too little respect. A feeling of awkwardness began to creep into her heart. The meeting went on, but Sophie could not focus on what was happening. Every time Marcus spoke, she was reminded of that flight, where she had made subtle remarks, implying that he was just an ordinary person with nothing special. Those words now felt like knives cutting into her heart. While everyone else showed respect to Marcus, Sophie could only look down at the table, wondering if he remembered what she had said and done before. Once again, Sophie found herself caught in a whirlwind of chaotic thoughts. She recalled the moment when she had mockingly laughed when he did not respond to her conversation on the flight. She remembered trying to demonstrate superiority, thinking of herself as more successful, far beyond him. But now, everything had flipped, and she realized that she was the one who was wrong. Although she tried to maintain a professional exterior, the questions in her mind kept repeating, making it impossible for her to fully focus on the meeting. Her colleagues started discussing collaboration strategies with Marcus, but Sophie felt disconnected. She sat quietly, her gaze occasionally drifting toward Marcus, and a profound sense of shame rose within her. Not because of what she had said earlier, but because of her realization of her own mistake. As the meeting neared its end, Sophie could no longer hold back and decided to approach Marcus after everyone had left the room. She didn't know what to say, but the feeling of shame grew even stronger as she realized that he had understood everything she had done and thought about him during the flight. Marcus stood up, smiling gently and nodding at everyone as they left the room. Sophie stood there for a long moment, unsure of what to do. Finally, she decided to approach him, but she did not dare face him immediately. "Hello, Marcus," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I want to apologize for what happened on the flight, for my attitude before. I was truly wrong." Marcus turned to look at her, his eyes still as calm as before. He didn't seem angry, but he didn't immediately offer forgiveness either. He simply said gently, "Sophie, I understand. I just hope you understand that what I do and what I have cannot be judged just by appearances. I do not blame you, but I hope next time you will not be so quick to judge someone without truly knowing them." Sophie stood there, completely silent. Marcus's words felt like a wake-up call to her. She realized that sometimes contempt and arrogance could cause one to miss out on great opportunities and break important relationships. She couldn't help but feel regretful because from the very beginning, she had failed to recognize the value of a person who truly mattered. The feeling of shame and regret made Sophie feel as though everything around her had come to a halt. She knew she had made a huge mistake, and the price she had to pay for her contempt was a wounded sense of self-esteem, along with opportunities she might have lost. The next day, Sophie went to the office with a heavy heart. She couldn't shake the image of Marcus from the meeting the day before. He was the man she had looked down upon and underestimated simply because of his outward appearance, but now he was one of the most powerful and influential figures in the industry she worked in. She couldn't help but blame herself for what she had done on the flight, and in those moments, she understood that her own arrogance had led her to make a huge mistake. As she walked into her office, Sophie tried to remain calm and continue her work, but thoughts of Marcus kept lingering in her mind. She knew she couldn't change the past, but if given the chance, she would love to make things right. In fact, the more she thought about it, the more Sophie realized something important. If she wanted to advance in her career, she needed to learn how to be humble and show respect for those around her, no matter where they came from or what their appearance was. A few days later, Sophie received an unexpected call from the HR department. They informed her that an important meeting would be held the following week to discuss a long-term collaboration plan with the company's partner. They asked her to attend and prepare for the meeting. Sophie knew that the head of this partner company was Marcus, the same man she had met before. Sophie felt anxious. She couldn't forget the previous encounter, and Marcus's words still echoed in her mind. But she couldn't let her fear hold her back. She knew she had to work harder, not just to prove her abilities, but also to regain the respect she had lost. On the day of the meeting, Sophie entered the conference room with a tense mindset. All of her colleagues were present, and the atmosphere in the room was very formal. Sophie sat down, her hands gripping the table tightly, trying not to reveal the anxiety in her eyes. But when she looked at Marcus, she couldn't help but feel a wave of unease rise in her chest. He still maintained his calm demeanor as before, but Sophie sensed a difference in the way he looked at her. It wasn't disdain, but rather an evaluation, a clear awareness of her attitude in the past. The meeting began, and Marcus started sharing the new strategies his company wanted to implement for this collaboration. Everyone listened attentively, but Sophie felt out of place in this space. Every time Marcus spoke, she was reminded of the indifference and contempt she had shown earlier. The feeling of shame rose within her once again. When it was Sophie's turn to speak about the marketing strategy, she still could not shake the anxiety. She tried to appear professional, but the tremor in her voice and the anxious look in her eyes were impossible to hide. Everyone was focused on Sophie, and although she tried her best to convey her ideas, she could not shake the feeling that Marcus was watching her closely. Though he did not show any emotion, Sophie felt as if he was evaluating every word she said, and in that moment, she just wanted to disappear. After the meeting ended, everyone stood up, preparing to leave. Sophie felt an emptiness in her chest. She wanted to apologize to Marcus, but did not know where to start. She couldn't continue living with this guilt, as it was affecting the way she worked and interacted with others. She decided to approach Marcus once again, despite the fear still lingering in her heart. As everyone left the conference room, she walked up to him, and this time, she could not remain silent any longer. She knew she had to make things right. "Marcus, I want to apologize," Sophie began, her voice slightly hoarse but firm. "I know I was wrong before, and I feel ashamed of what I did and said on the flight. I judged you too hastily, and I apologize for my lack of respect." Marcus looked at her for a moment, saying nothing, but his gaze was not filled with the anger that Sophie had expected. He simply looked at her calmly, as if waiting for her to continue. "We all make mistakes, Sophie," Marcus said, his voice gentle yet firm. "The important thing is that we recognize them and learn from them." I do not hold it against you, but I hope that you will never judge others just by their appearance or what they show in a single moment. Everyone has their own value, and sometimes the things we fail to notice are the most important. Sophie stood there, listening quietly to every word he said. She felt as if a heavy weight had just been lifted off her shoulders. What Marcus said was not just an apology, but a lesson in humility, respect, and how to evaluate others. Sophie realized that she had overlooked an important lesson all along, and now she was truly beginning to understand what real maturity was. Sophie looked at Marcus, her eyes no longer filled with anxiety or fear, but instead with appreciation and gratitude. She knew that what he said would change her forever. And from that moment on, Sophie was determined never to make the same mistake again. She would learn to recognize and respect everyone, no matter who they were, where they were from, or what they had. She understood that in life and work, only humility and mutual respect would truly help her advance. Sophie left her meeting with Marcus, her heart lighter than ever. Her apology was not only an acknowledgement of her mistakes, but also the first step in reinventing herself. She realized that it is not always easy to recognize our mistakes, and sometimes we must face the consequences of arrogance and complacency. But more importantly, Sophie felt strongly that in a world full of challenges, humility and respect would help her move forward on her career path. Since that day, Sophie began to change in how she viewed the people around her. She started paying more attention to the small details that she had never considered before, the stories behind each person she had once thought were insignificant. The arrogance gradually faded, replaced by a more attentive attitude, listening and learning from others. At work, Sophie became more diligent and careful, always striving to demonstrate her professional abilities, but no longer feeling the need to prove herself in a negative way. She no longer rushed to judge anyone. Instead, she took the time to understand and learn from them. She began to build better relationships within the company, relationships she never thought she would develop, because before, she had only focused on herself and ignored those around her. At the same time, the collaboration between Sophie's company and Marcus's partner company continued to thrive. Marcus remained the leader in all important discussions, but Sophie no longer felt lost or lacked confidence like before. She had learned to listen, contribute humbly, but with great insight. And most importantly, she felt the trust of her colleagues and partners. With this change, Sophie gradually proved her abilities, not only through the brilliant marketing strategies she created, but also through how she treated those around her. She began to realize that success does not only come from knowledge and professional skills, but also from one's attitude and behavior. A good strategy could be overlooked if there is no cooperation and mutual respect. And a talented person cannot shine without humility and recognition of the value of others. One afternoon, after an important meeting, Sophie happened to run into Marcus again. He was standing by the window, looking out, his usual calm expression on his face. Sophie walked up to him, this time without any anxiety or confusion. She just wanted to thank him for giving her the opportunity to change and learn. Marcus, Sophie began, I am truly grateful for what you shared with me. I have learned so much not only about the job, but also about myself. I understand that humility and respect for others are key factors in advancing in life. And I thank you for helping me realize that. Marcus looked at Sophie, smiled gently, and replied, Sophie, I have only shown you a part of what I have learned throughout my life. Everyone has their own unique values, and if we can recognize and respect those values, we will never feel lacking. You have done well, and I am glad to see the change in you. Marcus's words were like a form of encouragement, and Sophie felt that she was on the right path. Not just in her work, but in life as well, she learned that nothing is more valuable than knowing how to listen and respect others. The valuable lessons she received from Marcus not only changed the way she worked, but also transformed how she faced challenges in life. As time passed, Sophie grew more confident in her work as well as in her personal relationships. She no longer felt the need to prove herself or stand above others. Instead, she understood that respect and care from the heart would take her further in her career and in all her relationships. And every time she remembered that fateful flight, Sophie only felt grateful because it helped her realize the important values she had never known before. Ultimately, Sophie realized that sometimes the greatest mistakes lead to the most important lessons. Humility is not a weakness, but the strength to learn and grow. And sometimes the person you once looked down on may be the one who helps you recognize your true strength. Sophie never imagined that the changes in her thinking would lead to such a powerful transformation. After the encounter with Marcus and the valuable lessons she had learned from him, she felt as though she had been reborn with a completely new sense of confidence and humility. She began to see herself truly developing, not only in her work but also in her communication and interaction with those around her. At the company, Sophie's colleagues started noticing the significant change in her. They no longer saw a Sophie who was arrogant, always trying to prove herself as the best, but a person who listened and learned from others. She began to actively participate in meetings, not to talk about her own success, but to share her creative ideas with everyone. Her colleagues also began to sense her openness and friendliness, and they no longer felt that Sophie was always trying to outshine everyone else. One of the most important projects of the year for the company was the partnership strategy with the company, where Marcus was the chief executive officer. Sophie was assigned the task of continuing to develop marketing strategies for this campaign. She worked more closely with her team, listening to feedback and ideas from everyone instead of just relying on her own ideas. She realized that in order to succeed, it was not only about individual effort, but also knowing how to work as a team, collaborate, and respect the contributions of others. Her interactions with Marcus no longer made Sophie feel confused or anxious. She knew that she no longer had to prove her worth through every word or action. Instead, she focused on the actual work and poured her heart into the strategies she was building. She noticed that Marcus respected her more, not only for her professional abilities, but also for the change in the way she communicated and treated others. One day, during an important meeting, while everyone was discussing the next steps of the partnership campaign between the two companies, Marcus unexpectedly praised Sophie in front of all the colleagues. He said, "Sophie is not only an outstanding expert in the field of marketing, but she also has the ability to listen, learn, and continuously improve herself. She is always open to new ideas and respects everyone's contributions. This is a quality not everyone possesses, and I am very happy she has joined this project." Marcus's praise made Sophie feel incredibly proud. Her heart was filled with gratitude, not just for the compliments, but also for the transformation she had undergone. She had not only learned how to respect others, but also how to appreciate the values in both work and life. When the meeting ended, Sophie walked out of the room with a smile on her face. She felt not only confident in herself, but also that she had truly grown. She realized that success was not about what you can boast about, but the value you bring to others. She knew that the change she had gone through had not only changed how people saw her, but had also changed the way she saw herself. In the months that followed, Sophie continued to advance in her career. She was given more important opportunities, and the projects she participated in achieved increasing success. Not only that, but she also became a role model for the younger colleagues in the company who sought her out to learn from her experiences and work methods. As for Marcus, the relationship between him and Sophie continued to grow closer. Although work still presented challenges at times, Sophie felt that she was no longer alone in every decision. She knew that she could learn from and receive support from Marcus, who was not just a partner, but also someone who had helped her reflect on herself. In the end, Sophie realized that the path to success was not just a race to achieve goals, but a long journey that required patience, humility, and the ability to respect others. She no longer cared about always being at the top or being recognized, but instead, she focused on bringing value to the company, to her colleagues, and to herself. The lessons she had learned from Marcus not only changed her work, but also transformed the way she lived and faced challenges in life. Sophie now understood that, in any situation, humility and respect would be the most important keys to achieving sustainable success. And when she thought back to that fateful flight, when she had looked down on Marcus, Sophie only felt gratitude. If it hadn't been for those embarrassing moments and the realization of her mistakes, she would never have grown or learned such valuable lessons. Thank you all for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the best stories. See you in the next one.